take home the golden gloves, you've got to put in the work, and you've got to be tough as nails. Ashley Kalis was driven to achieve. Today, Kalis is still fueled by that same hope, grit, and determination. A mother of 3 school-aged boys and successful business owner who ran testing and vaccination sites across the state. Kalis is the fighter Rhode Island needs right now because it's time for a change. Ashley Kalis for governor.
Good evening. Welcome back to the Washington Outsider Report on the Coalition Radio. For those newly joining the program, my name is Irina Zuckerman, and I'm the editor-in-chief of the Washington Outsider. Today, we have with us a very special guest, Lubna Dajani. She is a futurist, humanitarian, author, data security and privacy specialist, and many, many other things besides the polymath. I forgot to mention a lot of the times we end up talking about global issues that don't receive nearly enough coverage, but most of the time they're geopolitical and they're depressing. Today we'll be talking about more of a problem-solving integrated approach that hopefully will help build communities, hope respond to global crisis, and empower rather than destroy people. It is a global issue, but it is a positive one, and one I'm very excited to discuss with Lubna. Thank you and welcome to the Washington Outsider Report. I'd like to start by asking you just how did you come to be doing all these exciting things? How did you become interested in them? What's your background entering this area?
It's funny because the truth is I grew up thinking I was going to be a doctor, and then when I moved to the States, I didn't realize that I get paid the last 3 years so I decided, what am I going to do? I used to watch very little TV, but the Jetsons was that one program I used to watch as one of the things I watched, and Tron, the movie. So I figured everybody's going to need one of those computers, and I found a school that teaches systems analysis and design so that I could learn how to design the systems that would enable these companies in the future. And this way I could satisfy my need to know about different systems and how they work. And that's sort of really how it started. I blame it on the Jetsons.
So this is the one time where Hollywood and the world of films actually led to something positive for once.
Oh, thank you.
So coming into the world of technology and innovation and data systems, what exactly, what made you tick in response to those systems? What did you start out doing, and what were you hoping to achieve?
Yeah, so like I said, I wanted to learn about how different businesses run. I think I have this attention, that they call it attention deficit. I think a better word for it is polymath, if your attention is distributed amongst other areas of interest. And I always liked the different sciences. And, you know, when my friends were looking at the People magazine or something like that, I was picking up Scientific American. So, but I think really, I wasn't kidding. The movie Tron was about this kid going into a computer, right? The original Tron, and then being able to travel everywhere. And at the time I was studying, and I had kept all my major classes to the end of my schooling, and my operating systems class was a special class that was an experiment done by my professor, and it was a small group of us, and it was Unix. So I actually got to play with Unix back in the 80s. And you know, if you combine Unix and just mounting another file, and it just made the connection for me with that movie. With Unix, you can connect the world, and I had this vision that the whole world was going to be connected, and everything will be connected everywhere, at home, in the car, in the office. So I set out to do Unix and to do this distributed. And AT&T was the first place that I got to do that. And I didn't realize maybe how fortunate I was that my career initially went the way it did, because not only did I didn't get to play with Unix first, but with PCs, so even more distributed. Then I moved into data science, which is really what I was doing. So I was designing data flows and business process, and it just so moved straight into early AI decision support and designing end-to-end systems that helped people improve their work. And for me, what was more interesting is to demonstrate to them that it was improving work rather than automation replacing them. And I realized I was an innovation junkie, you know.
So you were talking about the Internet of Things, this interconnectedness, decades before it became even remotely realistic and plausible. What kind of a reaction were your ideas evoking at the time? Were these companies part of the vision, or were they just, you know, asking you to do that specific work and not really seeing where it was all going to lead?
Yeah, no, it was never really seeing in honesty to where it was lead. I mean, when I did the visual programming for a short time, I did actually early, very few people would probably remember a language called Easel, which was on OS2. So it was very, very early visual representation of data and automation of mainframe systems into unified. Really, it's basically screen scraping and automation, but it had enormous business impact. So the driver for adopting innovation were never innovation, or even seeing how innovation that's right in front of you. The opportunities it was always about obviously profitability and returns. So I found myself always fighting the fight of demonstrating that where is the ROI in 256K memory? Where's the I in the .com? You know, just to speed it up. There is no ROI in. I mean, I had this big fight about who needs data visualization or imaging or the web. When web first came out, even an intranet was. I was practically accused of treason to bring it in the early 90s. You know, I happened to be at NYU doing interactive telecommunications under Red Burns, and I discovered this thing called Mosaic. And that's obviously when I fell in love with this idea of the web, and I sneaked that into Viacom as a telephone directory. So I think for me, it was the innovation. And I've always been, because I have a systems degree and a desire to always make it meaningful for the end user, and my love for innovation, seeing that the innovation needs to happen up and down the stack and happens up and down the stack. I had to find ways to Trojan horse the innovation into corporate by demonstrating its financial returns. And sometimes I found myself obviously with a group of people who fought the fight for things like SMS interoperability when it came to mobility. Once I moved to mobility, I became a CIO of a wireless carrier, fell in love with the idea of mobile. And I started saying, okay, the web untethered people, and mobile untethered the web. And that's when I shifted my career from traditional IT and bringing applications into the enterprise, leveraging technology, to evangelizing the technologies itself, and to evangelizing the technology into its own industry and across industry to create collaborations that are necessary to facilitate the coming to life, this hyper-connectedness vision, which is why I feel so responsible now, because its applications are quite powerful.
To some degree, I'm a little mystified by the obstacles to innovation, given the fact that time and time again, first of all, some level of innovation is inevitable. It just happens. And the question is, who's going to get there sooner, you or your competitor? And second, we have seen concrete examples of companies failing and their products failing because of their kind of Luddite refusal to move along. We have seen what happened to the Internet Explorer as a result of Microsoft's deliberate speeding down and Google developing Chrome in response to that problem. So how do you explain this reluctance to see the obvious upsides and the obvious financial returns of improving people's lives by creating better and more groundbreaking products?
Yeah, a few things, but you called me a futurist in the beginning, which is it's I guess it's true because I have foresight. But in the older time, it was called a flake, because because to be a futurist, you really have to have a systems view. You have to have a more of a holistic view at things, and you need to step outside of your own comfort zone and look at it from that of the stakeholders involved. And even sometimes you have to expand your own thinking to include the proper list of stakeholders. Very often today, even in smart cities, not to change the topic, the data subject, even the individual that we are measuring their data, is not even considered a stakeholder. So it's partly that, partly the mindset. We come from a world of domination, of really, even when we have laws for against monopolies, but we get to a point where we have to be regulated. We have to grow up, and then we come back together. So it's the mindset has always been, if we can agree not to make the investment into innovation, we can continue to milk the market for the revenue margins that we seek to get and that we are getting, then we don't have to, and we won't. And that's how, for example, when I first started talking about location-based services to carriers, they thought I was out of my mind. And why would they invest in upgrading their network so that they can offer more of these services we were evangelizing to them? But once E911 became a mandate, then they came back, oh yeah, well, now that we had to spend the money, how do we monetize that again? So it's always, this protecting my, covering my my back end. It's as long as I am making the revenues that I want to make. And innovation was not how we competed. Not most of the giants in the past. I mean, we are changing.
So you saw that at the early stages, the companies were more invested in what seemed to be stable, what seemed to be producing, a stable stream of revenue, and they were not particularly good at risk-taking or out-of-the-box thinking.
Right. I mean, generally, and if they didn't have to, and there is always, and then when innovation happens at a point where you are bringing different industries together, so it's a collaboration of cross-sectorial, then who owns the relationship? Again, it's that mindset of I own the customer. So yeah.
What you just reminded me is, the US or, frankly, any other country's bureaucracies, there's always interagency competition over different things. But one would think that between companies in the private sector, this collaborative interdisciplinary approach of sharing credit would not be an issue. That's the whole point of it being private sector. But it sounds
yeah, you would think. But even in some of the giants, in some of these companies that are that have multiple P&Ls, then it takes a lot of effort and conscious effort at the senior leadership to instill that sort of mindset. Otherwise, they're only focused on their P&L, and they're not necessarily, it's how we're measured. And that's partly when we talk about the kind human and this moving, how do we affect the trajectory of humanity? We have to, sort of step aside and be honest with ourselves, look at the mirror and say, what is it that we're going for? What are our priorities? And our priorities have been profitability at any cost. Even within an organization, as long as the bottom line isn't impacted negatively by my P&L, I don't care if collaborating with you might raise us all collectively or what have you. I don't have that directive. So it's again, it's our governance, it's our policy, it's how we're framing. And I say we've been in a two-dimensional world, time and space, and now we have time and space and the cybersphere. So we have no excuse that we forget and learn to learn from our past mistakes. We have the data before us, and if we don't wake up to it, we're developing enough intelligence in AI that we could potentially create another life form that would naturally see us as a parasite, if not just redundant.
Well, the human instinct certainly seems to whatever they create to imbue it with its own neurosis. So it is only natural that if you had a company that was deliberately slowing down its own product, another company might create a creation that will be, that may damage those who are trying to compete with it. I can certainly see that happening, having some sort of an anti-compete program in a high-level artificial intelligence system. That's actually perfectly plausible, unfortunately, because that's the inclination. But you facing all these hurdles and shifting into trying to move towards a more innovative technologies and actually moving from systems to technologies themselves. You were facing these hurdles. How did you manage to break through, and how did you end up developing your own vision?
I'm still working on it. I'm still working on it. I mean, there is, I mean, my vision for connectedness, okay, it wasn't just, it's a technology, just like all sciences are tools, and for us, it's what we do with them. So while if I look at where we're at in terms of adoption of technology and the way we've adopted it in the applications, I'd be very, very proud of how on the money I've been. But I also feel immense stress and guilt for the very same technologies. I say sometimes I feel like the person who invented the atomic bomb. Not that I invented any of this stuff, but I contributed to bringing it together, behind the scenes work that brought companies, countries, sectors together to collaborate. But these are the very same tools that we can use to compete. And it's not just company to company, or nation to nation. It's really, it can end up being the very, very powerful tools that divided on a very binary basis, have and have not, and strictly that.
What was the most exciting, but at the same time, the most, I would say, concerning product or project that you happen to work with?
Yeah, I think everything that I work on, it's all like I work on the things that I love. I've worked on immersive, and I think immersive is very, very important. I worked on distributed, and I still do on all of them. It's the integration of all of them that is most exciting for me. I say it's the point where all the points intersect. If it were a Venn diagram, it'd be that little point in the middle, which is where I find myself very satisfied. So but for me right now, what is obviously most, it's again that bring together, particularly as you have distributed and you have sensors everywhere, and then you have blockchain type technologies that would allow you to have all the distributed compute and access. Then you have all the data science, and you have the enormous amounts of data that can be analyzed, harvested, what have you. And then you add the intelligence above it, so all the logic that would processes. And now the magnitude of impact across all sciences, our advancement and the whole society becoming, and I said that in the alternate back in when it was published in 2014, that we risk becoming all, as the population at large becomes the sample size, the sample. And we not to make a debate about vaccine or no vaccine, or mask or no mask, but the way we've deployed the vaccines is that's exactly where we are. And while technologies like also the immersive technologies, where we can be living in the metaverse, and we have the AI applied with visual and gamification and psychology, so empathic AI, we can create worlds that we can no longer discern which is the physical and which is the digital, and which is more importantly real and not real, and what reality is for us as individuals, and to what extent are our own thoughts our own thoughts. So we have technology that can read our mind without even having wires on your head. And we're testing your energy. So it's, when you combine it together, that's the power and danger.
So as someone who has successfully predicted these trends and these innovation trajectories, how did you try to warn about these potential dangers, and what is the solution in creating technology that's not ends up being not used in a dehumanizing way or empowering those who just want power for the sake of power? How do we create technologies that are helpful but not turn them into weaponizing them against ourselves?
We can't. We can't. I honestly don't see how we can, but what we can do is how we use them. What we can do is where we place emphasis and where we place value. It isn't the technology. Like, I don't want to sound like these gun lobbyists. And I mean, I'm not for guns. I'm not for war. I'm not for military anything. I'm for, love, peace, and let's all have a party. So just to be very clear. But the fact that it's on the incentives, and it's what we do with them. So it's a very powerful tool. A knife is a very powerful tool. AI is a very powerful tool. It can accelerate our abilities to discern cause and effect and advance it's just that where we place our emphasis, where we put our energy, rather than competing against each other, if we just shift where we put emphasis so that we're competing with each other in an expansive rather than extractive way, which is what we've been. We sort of stack on top of each other rather than alongside of each other. So if we shift our governance, our business models, our policies, so the way we measure wealth, like imagine if we measure how wealthy you are, not by how much currency you have collected from others into your pocket, but rather how many pockets is your currency enabled to enable others. So again, I think it really boils down to something that is very simple, like that binary shift. I say it's as simple as being dyslexic and flipping humankind to kind human.
So one of the things that you're just illustrating is the algorithm used by social media network companies, and one of the frequent criticisms that I've about them is that they deliberately use these algorithms to create a conflicting dynamic in the sphere, whether Facebook or Twitter. They create echo chambers and they pit groups against one another to generate attention.
Exactly, divide and conquer.
So obviously the opposite of that would be using an algorithm to bring people together and to encourage collaboration on various projects and relationship building and so forth. But for whatever reason, that doesn't generate as much interest, or at least those companies didn't think that it would. How do you overcome this problem, and how do you shift this incentive system for them to be doing that?
So we have to do it on multiple levels. That's why I say on the individual level, we need to augment our human intelligence, our own individual ability, because we are going to continue to live in a digital realm. The digital realm is here to stay. And I don't see us going back to when there is no where there were no computers, which would have been nice, actually. Maybe I don't know anymore, but but we can't go back to there. So again, it's how we apply them. But because we talk about a future where there are more robots, a future where there are less humans. We are inventing technologies and sciences that make a robot look, smell, feel, act like a human. We forget that even if we create robots, as if the robots will not need energy. So we need to think about where we're feeding the robots versus feeding the people. But again, the future of work, do we really have to worry about working in the way we used to work? If we have, what was the purpose of work? Is the purpose of work to just be able to sustain a living? If we can just sustain a living without that and redirect our energies to actually become more expansive in our consciousness, to become more aware of how do we transform ourselves to be able to exist beyond the bounds of this particular earth. And this particular earth, not necessarily, oh, we're going to put a few of us that are wealthy in a spaceship and ship us elsewhere. I rather start thinking about how do we transform ourselves as beings of energy? How do we create regeneration and longevity for the planet? Because it's a beautiful planet and it's a stop in our journey. But how do we evolve ourselves, our consciousness, our science, now that we have that much more power and compute and search and retrieve power? How do we expand ourselves to actually exist in different formats, perhaps? Why are we saying that we can only live on a different planet that is like our planet? But we've, but life is very adaptive, and I think we just need to redirect our where our energies are being placed. If nobody was hungry and nobody needed to worry about a shelter, there will be a lot less, if there were no poverty, if there was education, if there was a lot more love instead of judgment, abundance instead of manufactured scarcity. A lot of the things that we spend so much time, like, why are we spending so much time creating defense instead of creating love between each other? Why aren't we measuring ourselves by how we're elevating each other and together? Why isn't it the party? It's not how exclusive, but how inclusive your party was. We just have to really start thinking about, where we're placing value and what's really important in life. And the things that we're placing emphasis and value on are not even figments of our own imagination. And we can see, we can create in an immersive experiences, even better reality. I just recently, out at RSA, and I put a headset on and I walked on a plank, and oh my God, I mean, there were people that actually got so scared. This one person, he jumped off and actually hit something in the real physical world and broke his mouth too.
Oh.
I mean, I don't want to laugh, but it was that real. So there might come a time where we might not want to live in the physical world, but that would be a pity, because the real life is really, really beautiful. And the complexities that we are facing today, the majority of them are self-inflicted, just like all suffering. I mean, the pain when you get hit, if I accidentally punched you or something, that if I fell into you, you would hurt for a minute, but if you're angry, that hurt would last much longer. So we need to we really need to reset our priorities and how we measure. And our language, we need to sort of reset and make sure that we're speaking the same, that we have the same understanding and interpretation of key things, so that we can be better interoperable amongst each other, especially as we move more towards machine interpreted. Because like, as you were saying with the technology and with when you combine the sciences, so we in fact, let's say the people behind the screen, your service providers, your governments, the authorities, whoever is applying the technology, between your data, that your buying data, your credit card data, your shopping data, your sentiment data, your location data, and then when you're wearing, the last frontier, I call it, your body data, then when you take all that, and we're and you've heard of digital twins, and we can make these different silos, the components that create different dimensions of you and of your behavior. We now know you better than whoever the we is, yeah, will know you better than you know yourself, and will know exactly what time of the day you'll be more likely to say yes, or what are your fears, and how I can manipulate your behavior and your buying decisions and everything, down to you becoming potentially spending the rest of your life just laying in a coffin, like with a headset, thinking that you're living a beautiful life. Meanwhile, you're just
Like the Matrix, basically.
you're just a fuel cell. And that may be fantastic, but this is not why on this earth we have a different purpose.
So instead of becoming the Matrix, we need to figure out how to be a little less predictable, perhaps, and make it a little more difficult for people to manipulate us or to read off our data.
But or to shift how we're using this data. I mean, sure. I have no problem. I had breast cancer. I have no problem with contributing my data to improving the science. Sure. It's not just bombarding me with it really, it's creating, we need new governance. We need new economic models that are based on partnerships. We don't need to create waste and do landfills, kill the planet so we can say we made profitability. It's sickening to go into a supermarket and see them filling garbage cans, huge garbage cans with perfectly great chicken that they were selling at $12.99 before, but because they don't want to be sued and because they don't want to have loss, it's easier to write it off, so they put it in the garbage and pour gasoline on it so they not get sued. That doesn't work.
By the way, now that you mention it, I actually had an early interview with someone who made a solution for precisely what you're just describing, and on the Washington Outsider, if you check out the video with Ilana de Villiers, a young entrepreneur, she is actually managing precisely what you just described. So thankfully, some of these problems hopefully will get here to the US as well. Right? It's starting in Europe, but hopefully will eventually migrate here, because that is in fact a problem that can be resolved.
Yes, and with what we're doing, so with the kind human and this the innovation, the living labs, it is about creating a sandbox for innovators that actually care about new economic models and applying their gifts and their science and technology in their innovations and their arts and all that defines us, but in sandboxes created around communities that they are moving the sandboxes from the posh neighborhoods, the highly privileged, because where MIT labs is, or where Oxford or Stanford labs are, they're all in very gifted communities, and we're trying to shift some of those, and even the private, and talking to different sectors to help to work with us in moving their own labs in their own sandboxes, and together with us put them in communities where we have worked with the locals and with the grassroots communities and the scientists that know that environment and the culture, and then create solutions that address those particular problems, and in that process demonstrate the viability of the technologies, build out the ecosystems, and actually solve real world problems, and establish the channels to do the knowledge transfer and the local empowerment, so that we can create local regeneration, where we can move from the traditional aid that keeps people in need, and move us to a model of science-backed, culturally led regeneration and really human dignity.
That actually reminds me of the problems I see with the kind of political and institutional structure in the US, where most of these politics and institutions are centered in Washington, DC and surrounding areas, whereas most of the country is not privileged to be connected to that at all. Some parts of the country have internet issues, sadly, that don't have basic infrastructural arrangements. And one easy solution for that is to encourage NGOs and organizations to incorporate somewhere else, to function not out of Washington, but far from Washington, and encourage politicians to visit other parts of the country more often and
Exactly.
talk to people there, work with organizations there, bring them instead of having everyone to come to DC, have some of those meetings outside, have maybe a different voting part arrangement where part of the year can be spent traveling and meeting with these groups outside and seeing what they do and kind of conducting more to other communities. That could address the problem of our country being so disconnected from its own elected officials and
Especially in our country. I mean, I'm here, and even in the whether just in the States, it's funny because people think that we have everything here, but there's many, if not more, and I don't want to put numbers on it because I'm not that's not me, but there are just as many, there not just as many, but just as hungry people and just as disadvantaged and left behind people here as anywhere. Here being America, but really and this is the really sad thing, is in the backyard of the most privileged communities. We have some of the most distressed communities, but that goes to show that we have misplaced our emphasis and how we measure value. It speaks to our frameworks. All systems have now, with there's a lot of bad that happened with COVID, and we're not gonna, that's a whole other conversation of how we handled the lockdowns and the language we used, but because I think it's I warned against that in the beginning of the COVID lockdowns, the use of language like social distancing versus physical distancing, because that's if you like me or not, that's social engineering, whether intended or not.
Sure, absolutely, 100%. And now
the people socially is a very different, has a very different resonance than physically distancing. So we injected more fear instead of compassion for each other. And these are the things that we need to be cognizant of. And if anything, we need to learn from the tactics of domination, the tactics of tyranny, or the very tactics that we can use only to do one thing, to end that behavior, and to end the way of that way of reward. It is a good way to break down a problem. It is not a way to build a solution. It's not a way to build a society. Co-creation and collaboration. We need to intensify our love for each other and our caring for the well-being of each other, so that we can extensify our wealth and our reach. And we will heal. The planet will heal by itself without us, and it will get rid of us. If we don't, it's done it before. And we've wondered, oh, look at this civilization. How did they do this before with as little as they had? How do you know we didn't have a lot more before as well? I think we have very powerful technology now, and that may be more powerful than anything we've done before, but this is the time. It's an immensely important time that we're living in, and it's and I hope that it would be a time where humanity change its fractal and flourish to a more less sacrifice based and more satisfaction based society.
I like the sound of it, and a lot can be said about when you have, the more power you have, the more responsibility you have to exercise it with good intentions and intelligently. Unfortunately, while we are having this development of amazing technologies and amazing breakthroughs, we're also seeing that it's not necessarily commensurate with moral reasoning or reasoning in general, or high degree of education and thoughtful and educated approach to anything. We are seeing increasingly emotion-based, tribalist, sectarian, polarized, and simply not educated generations emerge from various power struggles. As somebody who has foreseen the rise of particular trends in innovation, what are you seeing can happen as a result of result of this, and what tendency do you see to help prevent that from happening? How do you find and identify what is the best use of technologies, the best emphasis on being able to implement them while also addressing those other social issues? Because as you yourself said, technology can be used for anything, but you need to have the public or the people who are in control of it that have the right intentions.
Yeah, and it's complex because it's on all systems, right? So anything that's complex requires a multiple views, a more, you know, to step even further back and to take in more perspective. Innovation in terms of science and what the combination of data science just alone, the advances in our ability to communicate and to compute, just information and communication technology alone, as a horizontal enabler has an exponential impact on the advances across other sciences. Now, if you take all that and you stack it up, then this is why the transformation that is happening is beyond belief, because between quantum compute and artificial intelligence and the ability to process and so many cores, like it's like all humans thinking and acting at the same time. And that's what it's going to take, really. It's going to take stakeholder engagement at every stakeholder. No one, and it's like, and like I said to somebody, we shouldn't be taking this one step at a time. You can't solve the whole thing. And I say, in fact, I don't think we have time for that. I think it is time that everybody steps up to the plate, takes responsibility. And if we all, as individuals, choose to take one step at a given time, and we have to make that choice. We all have to make that choice. And that choice, it isn't too big. It's the implementations will take a bit more work, but we have to choose. Like, that's why I simplified it to this boring, when you wake up, to ask yourself, am I being the humankind we've been taught to be, or a kind human today? And a kind human to yourself. I mean, I'm like guilty of when stuff hits the fan, the one thing that I forget is about anything to do with my own well-being. Mm-hmm. That's my crime. But there are people, but we make all sorts of crimes against the planet, against ourselves, and everything we do when we hurt each other. If we had half a brain, we would realize that we are hurting ourselves the most. So how are you being kind to a stranger? How are you being kind to the planet? How are you being kind to yourself? And at the end of the day, we have to realize also that changing our frameworks from, the whole charity, for example. What a lie. It's like when you give charity, the insinuation is somebody is better than the other person, has more. I know a lot of people who are poor who are much happier than a lot of people who are rich. Mm-hmm. And it's a fallacy that when you give something that you're not getting something back for it, but that's the insinuation of charity. But you're getting a tax deduction, you're getting a feel-good endorphins, you're getting all sorts of stuff back. And a lot of times you're even getting a gift. You might even be buying something that was made by someone. So we just need to create new value flows. And that's what some of the things that we're proposing here with these eco-villages is to test out different types of economic models and value exchange. Again, if we shift the emphasis to well-being, planetary and human dignity, and so if at the end of the day that I have a good day, that I have a happy day, that I supportive when I could have walked away, all of these things, if we just, but it's really just small, that the decisions that we make today frame the choices we have tomorrow. So if we all make a decision to be to measure our own well-being by the well-being of our edges and those around us, but if we all make that, so it's going to take work, but it's going to take the work of our leadership, and I also think leadership is we model it in the wrong way. Leadership is the bottom, pushing the greater society up, but it's again with COVID, we've come to this now post-COVID, supposedly, we are primed to define new metrics, new ways of exchange. We should not be okay with anybody bombing anybody. We should not be okay with even this whole idea of, there are a lot of fundamental ideas, all come from consumerism, all come from profitability at any cost. That's the root. The root of the problem is this mindset of scarcity, sacrifice, that we have to dominate, we have to compare, are we better than each other? It's all in our mind. It's all in our mind.
As opposed to thinking, how can we all benefit and how can we help each other achieve our goals and, create more instead of competing for less.
Exactly. And we hoard the stuff. I mean, we'll save the food, and we'll let it rot and put it in the garbage, and so as not to to be richer, so that we don't reduce our profitability margins. We just, it's senseless. If you freeze society and how we're behaving and where we put value, and our ridiculous accounting, and how we reward people and for what, and you just step aside and act like a judge of it, it's shocking. It's shocking that we forgive nations for doing what they do to each other. We forget a celebrity for doing something crazy. We forget bankers for leaving so many people out for their irresponsibility. We bail them out. We're always bailing out the big crime, the upstairs crime.
Mm-hmm.
But it comes from an old mindset that needs to take a bow at this point. It's really not that complicated, actually.
So when you mentioned the eco villages and mentioned the different value system, one of the it's an interesting combination of both development and humanitarian and economic and technological combination of factors.
Yeah.
How do you create that mindset of abundance in the community, for instance, that is used to feeling, scarcity and is used to hoarding scarce goods instead of sharing, and where there is no this philanthropic incentive or altruistic incentive to help others? How do you shift the incentive for people who are not used to thinking and who are basically thinking about day-to-day survival and perhaps at the cost to somebody else?
Right. So if you take that wheel, right, let's say, and I say wheel, but just like this, it's because it's really spirals, it's, so I'm not about this, but it echoes out. If we start with the community itself, so the community itself would be the one that has that scarcity mind, right? The ones that don't have, but what they don't have, whether they don't have a clean water, they don't have this, they don't have, these things are also the very same things that are what an innovator or a scientist who has solved for a climate related problem, right? Because there are shifting happening in the market today. So this idea takes advantage of that frame freeze of society. So these communities have a problem, but they have a lot of culture, history. Every community has indigenous wisdom, and everywhere there are elders that we need to also dignify and pull the wisdom from them, because they are the last who knew society before we were so digitized. But so their pain is someone else's. Like they say, one man's trash is another man's treasure, but also one man's pain is another man's treasure. Yeah. So what they're lacking are the very things that these innovators, if you bring the right mix of innovators together, need to demonstrate that their new innovations are viable in their primary market. So that's what really, I'm shifting where they put their marketing dollars, and I'm shifting where they're putting their, and for the greenwashers who are just buying credits, well, they can sponsor these activities. And what we're saying is we will take a lot of land and we then address all the challenges, from recovering the soil and the properties of the soil, because we so often forget about the soil, but we are really have been depleting it, the air, the water, the infrastructure that is needed to be resilient to the environment as it is today, and creating now self-sustaining structures that would demonstrate that there are all sorts of innovations happening in vertical farming, in energy, in energy distribution, in every sector, in enormous amounts of innovation. And now, because of the market is saying, oh, climate is no longer fake news, and there's a lot of money sitting looking for impact investments. So now the things that were not fundable are now fundable. So there will be an abundance of innovators, thank God, who will be addressing these issues. They need to demonstrate their viability. We match them with these communities. We'd also match the funding with the community or the cause or the technology itself. And in that way, what we aim to create here is to facilitate value flow for all stakeholders based on what they need. So we're just matching the needs with and the wants of people and organizations. But you'll be surprised, or you won't be very surprised that what is someone's need is someone else's gift, and vice versa. And this is what and within the context of these labs and eco-village, because they are living labs, we're not claiming that we have all the answers. We're claiming that we are creating environments where the people within the environment are defining what it will work for them within the scope of their environment. I'm not saying, oh, we're going to solve it for the world.
Sure.
I'm saying we are going to solve it for here. And anybody that is like here, that can mirror here, is welcome to mirror here. Right? And we're intending to enable this across all sorts of geographies. And it's really wherever the community, regardless of where it falls on the scale, is saying, we want to engage, we want STEAM for our sustainability, right? And I like this double play on the STEAM, but it's the technologies and the arts will give steam to regeneration. And do it this way, we might ourselves that we build up successful models that we can take it from there.
How do you prevent these societies, these new societies you're trying to build, from falling into this trap of dependency that humanitarian aid in its traditional sense creates? You give aid, you give money, you give whatever, and then just is spent, and that's it, and then they need more. It doesn't solve the problem.
So at the heart of it, as we solve them and we're bringing these technologies, then what we look, I talked about building a self-sustaining building and a self-sustaining community, but within it, we would we have to emphasize education and education as well, not just education, but bringing that elders. And really, I can't emphasize enough how important engaging today our elders in not only in dignifying them in the way we've moved away from that old way of a lot more respect for the elders, but the elders have wonderful stories and wonderful knowledge, and they were closer to the land, and they have a lot that we will lose when they are gone, and we are losing them very fast. And I think it will be just wonderful and lovely to be able to pull that out, and then to be able to celebrate that by sharing it, where the children can learn from each other and about each other through that aspect. So there'll be and mixing that, weaving that together with advances in all of the educational capacities that we have developing today, that all the hands-on knowledge and science that brings to the table. The other thing that is really important in a lot of places is primarily first reproductive health and women's health, because that is one of the biggest killers around the world, but also mental health. And mental health has become more and more important. And I wish I was wrong about that when I said that we really need to be cognizant, because this is going to be the true pandemic, is the mental health issues that we are are being are bubbling up, and I cannot imagine how our leadership would have been that incompetent that we would not be aware of the level of if I were a conspiracy theorist, I'd say it was a conspiracy theory so that we can get people to get rid of each other at the bottom layer. But because a lot of these things happen in the manifest themselves more in the more marginalized communities because their spaces are smaller and their means are smaller, so there is less. But you'll see the richer communities are not immune to COVID or to mental health. In
Sure.
fact, a lot. The other side would be obviously to do knowledge transfer. There's no point in testing out and building the stuff in a place without empowering the people that live there and the indigenous people and the people of that community to learn how to sustain themselves. And I say we have to fund entrepreneurship and innovation in a way that I say is pass it forward. So you have to give back to the community its ability to build itself. Remember, I started by saying they have to choose and they have to maintain. So the responsibility remains on the community to maintain the community by, we seed the community, but they have to water the community. And I don't mean like physical water, but I mean, innovation, we seed entrepreneurship, you bring education, you empower the people. And then we are talking about putting what we call a pass it forward fund, where the community would have to then put back money into the fund itself, as you know, so every person, as they do better, they, you know, so you give me, you know, you fund me, I start my bakery, you know, my low tech, no tech, high tech business, whatever it is that is viable for that community. It's the hairdresser, it's a shoemaker, it's a bread baker. And then they put money back into the fund, into the community. So again, that mindset of what's good for me is what's good for my community is what's good for me. And as we invest in each other, the community itself, even if the rest of the world is falling apart, the community itself will find its way amongst itself, will be able to exchange value. So that's why we're looking at the different types of community currencies and different value. And that's why I talk about value exchange as opposed to monetary exchange. Because that's what really matters. At the end of the day, what really matters is that you've slept well, you're healthy, you're learning, you're contributing, you're having a good time, and you're growing spiritually, not just physically or financially. That's not really what I think of when I think of growth. I think, again, I think we really need to broaden our perspective. I say if all you see is blue and all I see is red, we would miss the array of purples. And if we start seeing the value in each other, you know, it's lovely actually. If you've ever had a community party where everybody in the community brought some potluck food and ate together, it's fantastic. It's wonderful if we realize that we're living on a beach ball, and if you put a hole in it in one place, the whole thing deflates. And
unfortunately, one of the consequences, not just of pandemic, but digitalization and excessive dependency, I would say, on the digital world. I wouldn't say digital world in itself, but psychological dependency on this has been the breakdown of communal life and communal and human relationships. I think it's been devalued.
Yeah, the physical spaces. I mean, there are a lot of kids, they'll say, I have my family online, and they do. It just, again, it's in our ways. This is what it can be. It's not this or that. It's not like you have to have only day or only night. At this point, we have to have both. And again, it's how we define. It's just that when we're consuming that medium, and we're missing on the rest of it. So it needs to, I always said that it's our responsibility as technologists and visionaries to move technology from here, in my face, to here, so that it's enabling everyday life, that it's simplifying everyday life, not adding to the clutter or dominating. And right now it's dominating because we are using it as a tool to manipulate the mind of our customers or consumers.
But it's also become a crutch.
It is. but what else do you expect when you tell people physical social distance?
Mhm.
You know, when people have, you know, when we've put a lot of fear there, more and more people are, it's their only window to the world. And again, it's not, you know, it's not, it's, life is more than two-dimensional, and we need to add the dimensions for people. And that's why I say we need to engage the community. We need to bring back this, this what's in it for us, you know, if we are better, we're all better. And again, I'm not saying that it's exactly translated to universal basic income. I'm saying we need to do away with our old thinking
Mhm.
and just look at ourselves objectively and what really matters in life, and then reframe society that way. So that's why I think that way, that is a lot easier to demonstrate in eco villages that are in living labs, and then introduce that to the rest of society, I hope, at rapid scale. If
What
we are
role,
successful.
what role do you think the generation of beneficiaries can play in the sustainability of this project as a philanthropic venture? How can they kind of ensure that it increases and grows?
Again, if I'm hoping that what we are doing is taking into, has a place for every stakeholder, for every entity. So if the entity is an individual, and every individual, so my thinking, you know, I say it's like that lean back, you know, it's not, it's gender neutral, it's age neutral, it's really about, it's really boil it down to, it's an energy. You're putting in a bucket of energy and you're taking out a bucket of energy. Where, you know, who's consumed the bucket that you put of yourself, and where you're and where the energy that you needed to consume came from are secondary, because it comes from the pot of the collective fuel that we create by leaning into each other and by supporting each other. So I think if we are, as we're rethinking of our policies and our frameworks and how we want to govern ourselves moving forward, and we move away from this domination base to this partnerism base, this the people that are more popular, I'm not more popular, I'm not bigger, I'm not denser on the map because I have more, because I've collected more, because I'm richer, but because I've enabled more, I've facilitated more. By coming to me, you are connecting to that many more people that much quicker, and you're able to achieve what we're accelerating each other. Again, it's just, we need to change our math. It was you know, based on two variables, time and space, and now time and space and cyberspace, and that allows us a lot more intelligence and a lot more capacity to do the math. If that's what we need to do, if we can't just say it, do the math, you know, do the trajectory. It doesn't make sense to put ourselves into an amoeba dish syndrome, and, you know, where we just end up eating each other and killing each other, and at the end of the day, you know, we're extinct and the robots are laughing. I mean, they should be.
Where do you think of opening such a living lab first? Where do you see these projects going?
Also, there are a few, you know, a few communities that we're working with right now.
Mhm.
Obviously, sadly, it all also takes time. It takes money, and it takes some money. It takes resource. It takes all of the things that it takes today to awaken the society today to what is available. But also it takes, because I started with that a community has to raise its hand. So there are a few communities that we are starting to work with, and as we pile up enough of resources and interest, but if you want specifically, you know, we are having there is a very brewing activity in Kenya, in Liberia. We have a smaller group, but again, because people have to rally themselves, in Nigeria. We are working with one group in an NGO in India. I hope that we can rally some more. But more recently, we've other communities have come where conversations with regions in certain countries that are coming to say we are looking for, we don't want to be left behind in the digital innovation and STEAM, and because they are, whether it's like the Virgin Islands or and some islands here in the Caribbean. We started having some conversations just the other day at the U.S. Morocco Investments as well, where we met, that we can actually create where a community or a municipality, which would be fantastic, that wants to take a region and to experiment. So it's funny, as we're doing more of the talking about it with more people, more communities are coming up to the plate and saying, we would like to participate. We're also talking with a few philanthropic organizations that are a couple of organizations. There's one in particular that's looking to build a school in a community in India. So we're looking at the funding that they have already for that community, for that particular school, to see how we can not only utilize that, but how do we repurpose it? Because some of the stuff that will be based on the network of companies that are and innovators that are already at the table, are all bringing their technology with them, right? So they're bringing their technology with them. We're working with a group, for example, on that want to work on the energy aspects, because they have very interesting technologies that for building it on direct current microgrids, right? So it's bubbling in a few places, and I can't say, I'm dying to say, in our first opening, I manifest that, and but I will, hopefully the next time we talk, I'll be able to give you a firm which one of the few, but I would be very grateful if many happen at the same time, because the community owns itself. We're not, this is all this is, for real, creating that, I say, that first spoon of yogurt that we're going to put into the rotting milk of society and make it all yummy yogurt, and nobody knows where it started. Because we intend to live the value that we're preaching. So this will be an open platform and an open community, and any community that wants to plug in can, plug in, and X marks the spot. And we just need to rally innovations that address the challenge and interest, obviously, from the community and the supporters.
Do you think this out-of-the-box approach, this bringing together of the innovative technologies, interdisciplinary collaborations, can it help raise more out-of-the-box thinkers? Because today's education, particularly in the West, but also around the world, it creates factory mentality, it does not create innovation mentality overall. Not that there aren't exceptions, of course, but it's designed that way.
Yeah, I hope so. And at the heart of it, we're building, as I said, it's all ecosystem driven, and that's what takes time also, is but a big stakeholder is the educators and traditional schools. And even like some years ago, the idea of transdisciplinary, people would have thought you're insane if you're going to university with transdisciplinary thinking, but now there are a lot more. So there's a shift in how in education, it's about time. And I think there is more of that thinking coming, and more injected also with commercialization. And again, here, the risk that we run is, okay, because if this goes into greed-based, then it can also be, it can also go sour. But again, here is to make it so that it's about creating this collective value, this shared value. It'll be fantastic when schools can learn from each other and collaborate inject their bits into a community, the areas that they focus on. So I think that's the hope, is that we create these are open sandboxes and innovation labs and distributed manufacturing facilities, and so that can address innovation and create local manufacturing and building on the assets and resources of a particular environment.
A little bit of a provocative question, because as you said, it's an open sandbox, because it's an experiment. Experiments can succeed, they can also fail. How do you prevent failure, or how do you help people overcome failure, learn from it, become stronger, rather than become disappointed and give up?
Yeah. I want to say respect. Transparency, respect. There's, it's again that governance and the guiding principles that that you're building something, and hopefully with a bit of graph models of data, distributed ledger technologies. I mean, here's some of the the proper deployment of or application of certain technologies. Blockchain or DLTs in general, it's not how you just secure, but it has its own role in, it actually makes things more secure because it makes them more transparent in many respects. So I think in the ethics, the ethos we teach, that we implement, and again, this whole concept is based on it's very binary. It's simplicity is at the heart of this ingenuity. It's you're either want to collaborate and you have something that you want to put in and you are open with what you want out of it, or you don't. But I think if we're open, the whole idea of, again, I'm favor. No favors in this. We don't want anyone to do anyone a favor, and we don't want anyone to be doing something for nothing. And I think that is, no one is getting something for nothing or giving something for nothing. And if we're start by this little bit of honesty about it, so, and even if I'm happy with what's in it for me, is I'm recognized, or I feel good, or it's endorphins, or it was cluttering my house, now it's making a good use somewhere, or that if I'm ever down there, I can come and visit, whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
It's the, again, this just transparency, and it's agreeing on business models that create shared value. And it's modeling it after a lot of permaculture and using biomimicry, and look how energy is verbs and reverbs and vibrations, and I think if we just start be with a bit of honesty and a bit more music, harmonizing our energies, life is beautiful. And it's a shame what we've been doing to it. So, like, we need to just get over ourselves, really, and forgive ourselves.
This is a very positive outlook on life, because when we hear the doom and gloom from the media, it seems like we're on the verge of some apocalyptical dystopian future.
Because we are, the trajectory is in truth, the trajectory really sucks. Okay, it really, if we continue, but it's not the technology, it's what's in the heart. Yeah, it's our intention. That's it. I mean, but otherwise, you can wake up. I mean, I say, imagine if you wake up tomorrow and your smart home thinks that you're an intruder, your car thinks you're drunk, and therefore calls the police on you. And when they come to arrest you, they find that you have a criminal record and you're a molester and wanted for treason and whatever you want. And all that could be a mistaken identity, or it could be because somebody hacked and reset your pointers, because that's all it is anyway. So, I mean, but that's not far-fetched. that can
Yes.
easily happen. It
There's
happens.
tremendous potential reputational damage and destruction of life as a result of identity theft, as a result of hacking, as a result of the use of cyberbullying and cyber information warfare against particular high value targets.
And again, it all goes to where the incentives are. You can't, the technology will enable you to have this challenge. And that was actually even my own shortcoming. Like, I think, with this hyper connectedness is going to pry the controlled media from the blinders of controlled media, so we can see and learn from each other. But I didn't say, but we have to be very careful about the, fake news and deep fakes and the use of the art of selling, the art of war. All these are psychological manipulations. So all that's happening now is the technology accelerates that, accelerates our ability to apply them. Again, it goes back to, we need to clean ourselves up. We need to just say, you know what, I don't subscribe to these mindsets anymore. And we need to just define new frameworks. It's not that difficult. It really isn't. It really isn't. It is just that it's easier. That's why new developments are easier than retrofitting existing societies, because it's just about pride and breaking old habits. But we know exactly how to do that. During the lockdown, we've done exactly that. We put, we've trained people around the world, regardless of what nation, what color, what religion, what anything, they were all talking about the same thing, fearing the same thing, wearing the same thing, acting the same way. They even all learned new words. I think it was called Zoom. They all learned the word Zoom together in all languages at the same time. It became a household word in no time. Zoom. I love it. Here we are Zooming. But it's that, if you said that to somebody 3 years ago, people who have thought you're out of your mind. And I did talk about a lot of that in the alternate. In the alternate, I talked about many of the things that are happening.
And I actually want to address that a little bit. Tell us a little bit about the alternate. What was your vision then? How do you see things now? And given that you are a futurist who've made so many accurate predictions, what do you see the trajectory for innovation and for society in general for the future?
First, I want to say thank you for giving me this platform and for actually being an amazing interviewer and asking a lot of really great questions. And I hope that I will, in hindsight, this will have been worthy of your time with me. The alternate, really, like I told you, I have been working on, I started a thing called a networking group called Mobile Monday in New York, which was the New York chapter of what was a group started in Finland, in Helsinki, by Peter Vesterbacka, and was called Mobile Monday. And then another gentleman, Mario, I believe, started in Silicon Valley. And I was watching this stuff as an early, mobility person, and I liked the idea of this Mobile Monday. So I used to work on standards for Microsoft and T-Mobile before that, and I was in Helsinki working on something, and then I discovered, I was invited, do you want to go to one of these geek meetings? And it's called Mobile Monday. And I'm like, Mobile Monday? And I met them, and the next thing we're launching New York, London, Tokyo, and Israel, and we ended up being a global phenomena. And during that time, for me, what I did all this to help innovators, to help startups, to help this entrepreneurial mindset start to happen, and to make New York the new center of innovation, not just California. So we became, to revive the Silicon Alley concept. And there I was getting tired of people talking about IoT. Then I was already talking about what I had a series called the Ubiquitous Web. Remember, I went to school for Unix, and I had this vision of everything connected. So I was talking about hosting events, bringing people to talk about social networks, but very early on, the very, very early 2000s, talking about the future when everything is connected, and when the chair you're sitting in knows what you had for lunch. kind of thing, and what's going to happen then, and how are we going to reframe society? What role will the individual play? So these are the things that I was addressing anyway. And then somebody asked me, I guess maybe because I had been nominated, I've been won a few awards or something. And someone asked me if I would contribute a chapter on future cities, the role of the enterprise in future cities. So I being difficult, I did. I was like, oh, how are you going to narrow me down? I'm not sure what I want to write. He's just like, look, just write anything that you want to write about. So I said, okay, creative freedom works for me. So, and I started streaming, and then the context was about future cities. So that was my only anchor. And I started talking about the things that I care about. And I have been talking about, before that, I was sick of people wearing webcams on them. Everybody was laying in their bed with a webcam on them. I thought that was so, boring after a while. And I was running around saying I want someone to make me earrings or glasses that have cameras in them so that I can see, so I can track the things that I'm missing when I'm not paying attention. And so that I can watch someone else's life if they want to stream, and then merge the streams that I was thinking, like that. And that's when I met Steve Mann, and he was wearing, actually, he was at MIT, and he was now he's teaches at Toronto, and he was for the longest time wearing a backpack with cameras, and he was arrested even a few times for why are you recording? And if you're recording me, his attitude is then I should be able to record you back. And he talked a lot about surveillance society. So I started the document, actually was about, with a quote from him about that, about the alternate, about surveillance, and how we've moved so much of our lives into the digital realm, and how, and I just started streaming all about the different, from everything being connected to I talked about us becoming who controls the data controls the power. I talked about e-government, e-health, becoming a cyborg. That's why I had to go and get myself chipped, so I can say I have integrity. See, I have a chip right here. It's a Swedish ID card. Yeah, mom is like, you're gonna glow. So that's how it really started. And I was tired of us as an industry selling people on terms that are meaningless, like IoT, SMS, 3G, 4G, 5G, blah, 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 blah. And it's all marketing speak, and it's actually geek speak even, and it is not relevant to what happens in life. So the alternate is about, instead of the internet or intranet, it's the alternate. It's when all people, places, and environments connected, aware, addressable. That's where the name came from. And how, what role, and it started asking basically in it, what role do you want to play in the future of your life? And that we are no longer going to be living in these two dimensions, that we are going to be living in the three dimension, in this digital dimension will unlock exponentially, and it'll have a quantum effect on us. And that we need, but this is an opportunity for us to either, it's going to accelerate our trajectory into, further oppression, or it's going to liberate us. And my plea was that we have an opportunity to change. We have finally an opportunity for people to know. I got tired of hearing my elders as a child growing up asking the question, why? Because I didn't want to do things a certain way. I mean, I was born in the Middle East, so, it's like, because I said so, low, give me a logical reason. And I wanted, for, I wanted for all of us to have a say, and for people to stop saying, I would do something if only I could, but I'm only one. Well, with being all of us connected, we all have a voice. We can all have a voice. We can all be heard. We need to now make sure that we put things in place that protect that. Otherwise, the very technologies I said that will liberate us will end up being the electronic noose that enslaves us further. And that's, and we know that's what we're doing, because that generates money for the few that control us. So we it's just, the money just shifted a bit to a few more of these internet giants, but we still have an opportunity. There's still room for people we still have freedoms of speech a little bit, even though I was for a while there getting nervous about us in America, where everybody's being, if it's not, it was getting scary. I felt like I was because, you know, back in 81, I visited, I'll confess, I visited Iraq and Syria. And in Iraq, people were afraid to speak in front of each other. And I swear to God, during that time, I felt like we were going into that direction even here. And that would be, yeah, that just, yeah, we really need to change how we incent each other.
To push back a little bit, you mentioned this very real concern about surveillance society, and I love the idea of shifting the incentive systems. But do you think the kind of work that needs to be done will come soon enough in the face of the fact that a lot of this is already in place and already in control in the US alone, and it's one of the less controlled societies actually, because we have constitutional guarantees and a functional political system, maybe a little less functional now, but still functional.
Yeah, but still functional enough.
We have those internet giants, and we have them aligning with political actors and movements and ideologies and various actors and their incentives. But then we have even scarier situations with countries like China exporting their own social credit system and surveillance states models and methods of surveillance all over the world at this point. How do we, and they have, they're already there, and they have power and they have money and they have access and they have links to businesses. How do we stop that?
We stop that by not letting us become like them, by ensuring that our, the things that made America great actually stay, that freedom of, and the ability to, and to come with some to true integrity with all that, because we didn't necessarily live it. I mean, look how long it took us to have women's rights or to vote or anything, and not just in America, so we have to stand naked in front of the honesty mirror as humans at large. And we have to have a bit of bravery in that we stand up against the norm. And we really need to get our heads out of the sand of thinking that somebody else will do it for us. And as far as and maybe it's very naive of me to think that the people will still have a choice, but I think still in America, at least, and in Europe, we still do. And hopefully that we are electing people that are, I think all of that whole election system, I think everything needs to change. People, we should have an ability to speak for themselves individually and compile in a meaningful way. But our economic systems, our governance, our economic systems, how we measure, that fiduciary responsibility for profitability, that's what it needs. So we need to address it at the root and not the symptom. And I think it's our frameworks and economic models that are at the root that are flawed. So as long as we continue, and we have to question, it's not like we need to doubt and have mutiny, but we need to question our governments a lot. Mm-hmm. And I hope we don't adopt more of that surveillance mindset, because it gives you more, because it feeds the greed. So it was really what we need to eradicate is, before we can eradicate hunger, we need to eradicate greed. If we can eradicate greed, and my answer to it is doing these kind human trials and villages to do things, two things: to give a platform for innovators to demonstrate innovations that are healing to the planet. So ensuring that there is flow of money, of the money that is earmarked, whether it's earmarked because people that are earmarked want society to be better, or there is just greenwashing. I'll take their money anyway, maybe by applying it the right way, that we can demonstrate that there is profitability in sustainability, that you can still be sustainably prosperous and have longevity as an organization, as a community, as an individual, with a different mindset, with a mindset of abundance and gratitude, rather than a mindset of scarcity and envy and extraction. It's really, if we just make a small shift, just a small little dent in the orbit, yeah, we're not out of the woods, but I'm an eternal optimist. And yeah, so there's obviously a place also for regulation, and but that's why another area that I do a lot of work, at least at my level, to the extent that I can, is in some of the best practices and industry standards. And there are plenty of room for people to participate in these things. You don't have to be completely technical. You don't have to be anything in particular. And a lot of them, the meaningful ones, like with IEEE, for example, you don't have to have, you don't have to be a paying member. So you don't have an excuse that I can't afford to contribute to the direction of a standard. And standards are good for a lot of things. They are good for also saying that at minimally, this is what you should or shouldn't do, that an AI system should be transparent about how it's using your data. So these are the things that we're also working on to ensure that people are aware of the, not to cause panic, but for people to understand what's happening around them and to them.
Well, that is intriguing, because I think all of these things and all of these opportunities that most people, by the way, are not even aware of. They have no idea, I mean, that it's possible, where to go, even if they wanted to do it. They just don't know that, that they can.
Yeah.
Most people don't wake up. How do I contribute to a standard on, this emerging technology? They don't think of it that way. They think that there are people for that, some specialists somewhere who sit in a room and
yeah. Well, I mean, most of us are like that, and a lot of us are academics. But there is, and I think more of these open innovation labs and making science more accessible, and these, there are some good things that we can do, all this remote learning that we're facilitating. And I think, another thing is that we have to really work on is this infrastructure. Digital inclusion is a very important topic, and it's, I'm always very cognizant in that we have to do it in parallel. We have to put new incentives, socioeconomic and mental framing, together with the infrastructure, the digital infrastructure that will facilitate the access and that will facilitate the usability. So it's accessible and it's onboardable, that I can actually comprehensible, that I can actually engage with it, and that it's an experience that I can relate to regardless of where I am. So the technology has to come and meet me, and it's our responsibility to do that. And again, when we create these economic models that create a pass it forward incentive, then I think the ripple effect it'll cause a shift. Anyway, that's my hypothesis, and
I love it. I love it because yeah, because having this ripple effect, having an idea that you can do something, and even you don't have to push everything yourself. You can, have an impact that causes other people to continue on your path. That is a healthy mindset. That's how science is supposed to work. Building on each other's findings, and not just figuring that it all ends with you, and knowing that there are people out there trying to figure out the same problem, or that what you're doing is causing someone else to think or take action and do something. That's what helps people. I think we have become a society where when we have children, we're just basically turning them into little drones that repeat, well, you have to do this, graduate, go, and then go get a job and do something. So that kills the idea of dreaming and thinking, breaking grounds on how to end what's now and do something better, create something better, create something different, see a different vision that's not just, doing something for somebody else. And I think we need a lot more of that.
Yeah, and we need a lot more of people like yourselves and journalists like yourself who bring this, but really who bring it to the people, and we have to make it consumable and accessible and understandable and attainable. And I know even I sometimes sound like I'm you know, I thought I always simplify language, but I'm a lot of the time I'm either talking too fast, or it's because I've been looking at it for so long. But we need to humanize the language. We need to we need to make ourselves and each other and the science and the knowledge accessible, and attainable for anybody, you know, not reserved for the privileged. Or it shouldn't be, it should be democratized. Knowledge should be accessible at for anyone. I mean, it's amazing to think the way we differentiate ourselves from each other. It's amazing that we can worry about, you know, I don't want to get like the activists in me activated. But you know, there are a lot of musicians who've sung about, you know, how could somebody be in obesity while another person's starving, and how could we be throwing so much garbage and crying waste? I mean, it's the public's responsibility. I think it's about time that it's the public's responsibility to stand up and say, we're not buying the BS anymore. You know, the bullshit is so obvious. I mean, it's like we stand and say, oh, it's our government. But there's still people. It's still people. So
the people who get voted into the office, they're not, you know, usurpers who've arrived from some other country and invaded. They're the people who come from here.
Exactly. So but we have to take responsibility. We all have to take responsibility. And the more you have, and the more you know, the more responsibility you have to actually share that knowledge. And you should have more capacity to realize that the healthier the environment around you, the healthier you are. I mean, like, what were we thinking, poisoning our waters, our land, just so that we can say we have more money in the bank? Like, really?
Yeah, and at the end, taking shortcuts of that sort never work. They don't end well, and there's no need for it. Well, this was absolutely amazing, mind-blowing, and I really hope that our listeners have enjoyed it as much as I did, and I hope that we can come back again and to discuss different things and to learn more about your projects. And
next time we can talk more about you know, the biofeedback, and how are we going to extend our awareness to our physical, not beyond our physical skin, but to our digital skin.
I love that. I love that. I actually, yeah, I have you're giving me ideas. That's dangerous.
No, what a pleasure it is to be on and sharing this space with you, and the energy that emits from you is elevating, and I think I'm going to be addicted. Really, thank you.
Thank you so much, and thanks everyone who joined us today. This was the Washington Outsider Report. Come back next week, same time, Tuesday nights, 9 p.m. The Coalition Radio. Thank you very much.
Thank you.